Welcome to Code and Country, where we explore the intersection of cybersecurity, national security, and geopolitics. On today's episode, we are honored to have a guest who has played a pivotal role in shaping Canada's cybersecurity landscape, Sami Khoury. Sami is one of Canada's top cybersecurity leaders, currently serving as the senior official for cybersecurity in the Government of Canada. Before that, he led the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity in the fight against state-sponsored cyber attacks, ransomware, and threats to critical infrastructure. But the path that led him to the forefront of Canada's cybersecurity efforts isn't one that a lot of people know. This episode was recorded on location, and for security reasons, unfortunately, we don't have any video, but it's a great episode, and I'm pleased for you to have a listen. Sami, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you for being willing to spend some of your time. I think a lot of people know you as the head of the Cybersecurity Center. I don't know that many people know where you've come from. So how did you start the journey that led you to becoming the leader of Canada's cybersecurity agency and now the senior most official for cybersecurity in Canada?
Wow. So if I take a trip down memory lane out of university, so that's 32 some odd years ago, I applied for a job in Ottawa. I didn't know anything about the organization. It turns out that job is what set me up on the path that I am today. I was invited for an interview, and after the interview, I was told we'll start some security checks. And next thing you know, it's a job offer on working at CSE. In something that I didn't even know what it was because they wouldn't tell me what the job was at the time. They just said, we need your skills and you're going to join our engineering group. So that's how my career started. I spent about 25 years on the second side of CSE, then maybe jumped in the middle as the CIO of the organization at a fairly exciting time during the pandemic from an IT transformational standpoint. And then after that, was named the head of the Cyber Center in 2021, where I occupied that role for about 3 years until recently when I moved into the position of Government of Canada Senior Official for Cybersecurity.
What is the focus of your new role?
So building on those years of experience, my hope is in my new role, I'll be able to support a little bit more directly the deputy minister community across the federal government. At times during incidents, it's a bit challenging to wear both roles, head of the cyber center, managing an incident, and also supporting the DM in their incident journey. So this way, I have more capacity to do that, but also to bring those years of experience to help them understand what's at stake when it comes to cybersecurity and support the government in its sort of strategy and what do we want to do to make a difference. But I'm going to continue to be a spokesperson for the organization, give media or other interviews, represent CSE and the Cyber Center at international events, conferences, domestically and internationally. So that's primarily the role I'll be filling in.
You're somebody who is, I think, frequently talking about the threats that are out there. What are the current threats that are top of mind for you?
Wow, that can be a topic of a podcast in and of itself. But there's lots of, the threat landscapes keep changing. It just happens that we are talking in October in Cybersecurity Month, and we are about to release in a couple of weeks our updated National Cyber Threat Assessment, so the 2024 edition. But what we have seen over the last few years is, one, the continued growth of ransomware and sort of the ransomware attacks that Canada is facing, and that continues to be a primary threat. Their sophistication also. We continue to see also nation-state activity directed not just at federal government, but at provincial government, at businesses, and they are also moving in terms of sophistication and going after whatever the information is. But there's also some emerging threats that we see coming our way, and if we don't tackle them properly, so things like there's always the threat of misinformation, disinformation. There's the threat posed by AI and the large language model. And often there is an intersection between all of these threats that they end up amplifying each other. So imagine AI amplifying misinformation perpetrated by a nation state. So you get 3 check marks on that kill chain of incident if they both line up, or AI used to come up with malicious code that a ransomware actor will use to deploy against maybe a potential victim.
So there's a couple of themes that I'd love to touch on. Maybe we'll start with ransomware because that was earlier in your previous answer. My perspective is that Canadian cyber insurers during the early years of the pandemic, I think 2022 specifically, were on record as having lost something like $600 million in damages while only collecting premiums of like $160 million. So very much upside down. I think since then, we've seen a lot of pressure from Canadian cybersecurity insurance providers playing an increasing role in guiding their clients, whether to pay ransomware, whether not to pay ransomware. What would you like to see moving forward on whether ransomware payments should be made? Should they not be made? Is there a mandatory word that you would throw in there anywhere? How do you think about reporting? I just feel like you occupy a position where you're seeing the impacts of companies paying ransom. And so curious what your thoughts are.
Ransomware is a topic that consumes a lot of our energy at the Cyber Center, but it's beyond just a domestic problem. It's also an international problem. So I'll jump between domestic and international, but maybe starting with internationally. There's a coalition that got formed 40 years ago under the auspices of the White House called the Counter Ransomware Initiative. When it started, it was about 20 countries. I was just attending the meetings in DC a week or so ago, and now it's 68 countries that have joined that coalition called the Counter Ransomware Initiative. And, the idea is, one, to bring countries together, to add our voices to one another, and to work together on things that would send a message. So last year, the message was that governments will not pay a ransom. Canada was a signatory to that, and there's a statement put out that, we will not, as a government, we will not pay a ransom, and our institutions will not be paying a ransom. There was then a work package done over the year on insurance. And this year, at the Counter Ransomware Initiative, there was more than half of the countries that signed up to that statement about cyber insurance, specifically when it comes to the payment of ransomware. So I'll pause here, jump on the domestic front, and then maybe come back to the meaning of that statement. So domestically, I will acknowledge we do have a problem of incident reporting, in the sense that we don't get a good picture of how many incidents are out there, who perpetrates those incidents, so that we have a better pulse of kind of the actors behind some of these ransomware incidents and how to understand, the vulnerabilities and so on. So that's to understand the threat landscape when it comes to ransomware. The other thing is, you're right, Ian, is that insurance companies started offering cyber insurance policies, but they recognized early on, especially during the pandemic, maybe the lopsided nature of that economic equation of premiums versus payouts. We have mentioned a few times about raising the bar on cyber insurance, so that MFA is not, for example, multi-factor authentication is just as a checkbox on an application, but there goes into a lot of details about how is it properly implemented, how is it applied, privilege access management, what's your patching policy, like all these things, so that you are a better informed insurers about what is the bar that companies have to meet or organizations have to meet in order to benefit maybe from a cyber policy insurance. The third point domestically is when I'm asked, should we or shouldn't we pay? The answer is, it's a business decision. At the end of the day, paying a ransom is a business decision. But know that in paying the ransom, one, you're pumping money back into the cybercrime ecosystem, then there is no guarantee that the cyber criminals, because you are dealing with criminals, there's no guarantee that they will honor their end of the deal. There's no guarantee that you will be able to go back in time to pre-incident. And there's no guarantee that another actor, if they knew that you paid the ransom, won't come after you. And nowadays, when we look at ransomware and we see that they're also stealing information, it's not just about locking a system and asking for a ransom to unlock it. It's also stealing the data that you have on your network. There's no guarantee that, they will honor their end of the deal and return the data or delete the data. And as a matter of fact, there has been some cases where there has been some takedown of ransomware actor infrastructure, and data that was promised to be deleted was still found on their infrastructure. So it's better to prevent the incident than to live through the incident in a way. So back to the counter ransomware initiative and the effort this year that was led by the UK and Singapore as part of the counter ransomware initiative was to also work with insurance company and help raise the bar and help promote some higher cybersecurity standards. This is all voluntary in a way, but it's kind of for us, countries that have signed up to that statement to say we would like to see the insurance companies invest more in demanding higher cybersecurity standards by people who want to benefit from cyber insurance, but also encouraging cyber insurance company or insurance company not to use the policy to pay the ransom and instead pay for the recovery, but not to use cyber insurance to pay the ransom.
One of the other things that you mentioned just in your conversation around threats was the threat of AI. I think specifically, today we're talking about Gen AI, although as somebody who built a company on the back of machine learning, I resent the implication that AI is new. We're in the late stage of cloud adoption. I think feels to me like we're still in the early innings of AI adoption, specifically Gen AI adoption and what LLMs mean to really every facet of computing. I think one of the things that I've been hearing more and more, though, is quantum. And my perspective is that we're still a little bit ways away from the quantum Q-day arriving, or the singularity when all of our cryptography will be rendered useless by quantum computers. What's your view? Where are we? How far away is that? Is it time to panic?
It's not the time to panic, but it's the time to plan for that infamous or famous Q day. We know that there's a lot of continuous development in that space. Some Canadian companies and international ones are pushing the envelope on quantum computers and so on. We know that also NIST just 2 or 3 months ago released some algorithms in that direction. Those algorithms now have to be implemented in products. Those products have to be then tested. So there's going to be test harnesses developed to make sure that those algorithms are properly implemented in those products, so that if you buy a product that advertises itself as quantum computer ready or PQC ready, that you know that it has gone through at least some checks on implementation. So the idea being that between now and Q day, it's important that organizations understand what is their cryptographic estate, what do they have on their network, which products can be upgraded, which products will have to be replaced, maybe even to start budgeting for some of these costs, but not to rush today and simply buy the first product that shows up at your doorstep with a claim of being quantum ready. So we still have some time ahead of us. I would suspect that, when is Q day would probably be secret in a way, because no one is going to come out and advertise the fact that they have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. And that will be within reach of certain nations because of the size and the massive investment that's needed to have such a beast, crack today's code. We know that there is harvesting of encrypted information today, presumably for the day when such a computer is available to be able to decrypt it. But we have to get ready for that transition. but we don't need to rush today to replace everything we have until some of these algorithms stabilize and we have ways to test them. You also talked about cloud and AI in your intro. So, I still feel that cloud is the right way to go. We shouldn't forget about the separation of roles between the user and the cloud service provider. So not to assume that because you're in the cloud, you have no responsibility to safeguard your tenancy. You have a huge responsibility. The cloud service provider will maintain it, will patch it maybe underneath you. But from an upkeep, I still feel that it's probably better long-term to go the cloud way. But there are certain things we need to keep in mind is that cloud costs are also something that need to be managed. The elasticity of the cloud, unfortunately, sometimes results in unforeseen costs. So how do you manage that elasticity in a thoughtful way? But we're also seeing actors, nation-state actors, direct their activities at the cloud. And we're also living some vulnerabilities in the cloud. As the cloud becomes more and more complex, vulnerabilities will pop up. So it's not an entirely foolproof solution. I still feel it's the right way to go, but we still need to be mindful of some of those other challenges that moving to the cloud also need to be thought of and needs to be properly planned.
It's a good segue. I mean, most of the products that we're talking about here, particularly some of the large cloud providers, are themselves with allies, but they're not necessarily sovereign cloud providers. And so, I mean, most IT cyber products procured by Canadians are built elsewhere. Obviously, we saw during COVID the impact of outsourcing our supply of PPE as an example. And I think it opened a lot of eyes on the importance of sovereign industries. How do you think about the sovereign cybersecurity industry in Canada as it exists today and how it might exist in the future?
There's amazing innovation in Canada, and we have extremely talented people, extremely talented startup with great ideas, and I can only hope that they're all successful and we can put all of them on the map. Canada, unfortunately, is a small marketplace, and for many of them, success means diversifying and going into the US market, the European market, the Asian market. So all of that is great. The challenge is sometimes, from what I can see, is that soon they get noticed and they get bought, and we lose a little bit that sense of made in Canada or that many of those innovations. So it's important to continue to support that ecosystem, to continue to promote innovation, and to see how can we be user zero of some of these technologies and benefit from all of that innovation and be the first one to benefit from it essentially before the rest of the world. So I've seen innovation in cybersecurity, I've seen innovation in quantum, I've seen innovation in AI, and we are recognized in those three spaces as often punching above our weight. But at times also I find that we're a little bit too modest.
What role, if any, should government play in that sovereign cyber industry?
I think the role is in terms of there's many players in the government that are here to support innovation, whether it's ISED, whether it's NRC, whether it's SSC. And so I think it's important to recognize that we all have a role to play. And part of that role is to support some of these industries, maybe through some, the NRC has some some challenge that they throw out. D&D has some challenges. We are happy to also participate with many of those departments in looking at the technology and seeing how we can assess it, but also seeing if we can integrate some of these products into our own IT fabric in Canada.
I think that you've had a front row seat to watching the public and private sector evolve. I mean, having started on the SIGINT side and then going into the external face of now the Cybersecurity Center, which has become much more prominent and visible. How have you witnessed that collaboration between public and private, between institutions that were typically very closed, intentionally very closed to industry and really the outside world? What does that evolution look like?
it's been a cultural journey that is unique, I would say. And having grown up in an organization where even acknowledging that you work for that organization was not possible, to going through kind of the role of the CIO and having a little bit more external facing, to being the head of the cyber center, which not only you acknowledge that you work for the cyber center, but you are promoting the cyber center and you are out there and talking about the services. So it's been quite the cultural transition. So I'm super happy to be out there to talk about the cyber center, to talk about the services that we could offer. More importantly, to find opportunities to partner, because there is no way we can do our job at the cyber center or without a partnership with the private sector. I often used to say that the Canadian industry, Canadian businesses are our early warning system. They hear, they see things that, often before we hear about them. Of course, we have our intelligence mission that informs us, so we cannot do our job without kind of that level of partnership with our SIGINT colleagues and what they're telling us about the threat out there. But also we cannot have a good pulse of what's happening in Canada without the partnership with the private sector, who will bring to our attention incidents or pull us into incidents. So it's been a challenging cultural shift because it happened while we were also in the middle of a pandemic. So the pandemic has unfortunately capped a little bit our ability to be out there and to talk about the cyber center. So the cyber center was set up in 2018, and then we had a pandemic that has affected us for two years or so. But now we're back out there and we're back engaging. But also we're also organizationally, for some it might be a bit more challenging to adapt to the fact that you're part of the cyber center, but you're also part of CSE. And how do you find that right balance between being out there talking about the cyber center and the amazing work that's taking on here, but also recognizing that you are part of an organization that also has to respect its identity. And so often we say we're not a secret organization, but we're an organization that has secrets. And that's how best we describe CSE.
You've just talked about a change of culture. I think one of the other things I've heard you talk about is a culture of cybersecurity resilience. What does that mean to you?
Lately I've been talking a little bit about the culture of resilience. And I think we need to recognize that incidents will happen. And, maybe one day, way in the future, cybersecurity will be a solved issue and we won't have to deal with incidents. But until then, the reality is that it's a matter of when an incident will happen, not if an incident will happen. So with that in mind, we need to be prepared organizationally for that day, the unfortunate day when there is an incident. And how do you prepare yourself? Prepare yourself, but not just doing the right things, the patching, the passwords, the privilege management, the backups. All of these contribute to the idea of kind of continuing to raise the bar. But should an incident happen, resilience means that how long will it take you to get back on your feet? How long will it take the business to recover from that incident? Some businesses can recover, if everything is properly lined up. A business can probably recover in fairly quickly if the incident was contained. But if it's a fairly broad incident, it could take weeks, if not more, for a business to recover. And that has a huge cost on the economy, has a huge cost on the survivability of that business, and possibly has a huge cost on community where that business, whether it's a hospital, a school, or a company, that it occupies within that community. So let's think about how do we build resilience so that I've heard somebody say once, how long will it take you or how much would it cost you to do a Control-Alt-Delete of your business? You can reboot a PC and hopefully get it into a clean state. How long will it take you to reboot your business and get it into a clean state? And ideally, it should be as minimum time as possible, recognizing the impact on the people, the impact on communities, the impact on your revenues, and all these things. So an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure.
My last question was what is the proudest accomplishment of your career?
That's a tough question, but I would say probably the proudest accomplishment is having emigrated to Canada is finding myself working for Canada's cryptologic agency, having spent 32 years at CSE and having occupied some fairly senior role both on the intelligence and having made a difference to some of our intelligence mission that unfortunately we can't talk about, but also having led the cyber center, so the flip side of the coin, and hopefully contributed to the cyber center being better known out there and maybe better recognized. But for as long as I have some energy, I'll continue to do what's right for Canada and help wherever I can.
Sami, thank you so much for joining us today. To our listeners, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow Code and Country wherever you get your podcasts. Because this is a new podcast, ratings and reviews really help to hopefully make some other people aware of this show. As always, stay informed, stay secure, and see you next time on Code and Country.